Welcome to the Engineering with Nature podcast. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on the Engineering with Nature initiative since 2010, working and collaborating to advance the use of natural processes and systems to deliver a broad range of economic, environmental, and social benefits. EWN develops and implements nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It brings together a growing international community of practitioners, scientists, engineers, and researchers to harness the power of nature to innovate and solve problems and create sustainable solutions. This podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Welcome to part 2 of our discussion about the World Bank's approach to using natural infrastructure solutions to address some of the most pressing climate change challenges in the world. We're pleased to welcome back our guest, Todd Bridges, National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Brenden Jongman, Senior Disaster Management Specialist at the World Bank. Coping with environmental and climate crises in a normal year is one thing, but the pandemic adds a whole new dimension and much more complexity. Brenden, is there an opportunity for nature-based solutions as the world prepares for post-pandemic recovery?
Actually, I think there are great opportunities for using nature-based solutions to link up to COVID-19 recovery, even during the pandemic as we speak. Actually, many ways in which vulnerable communities who have been both financially and personally affected by COVID-19 can be brought in to restore and maintain ecosystems as part of a nature-based intervention. And we already see examples of that. We are, for example, we're working with the city of Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone in Africa. And the mayor has an extremely ambitious plan to plant 1 million trees in the city, and they're well on their way to getting there. And they're rolling this out with support from the World Bank and other partners, but mostly by using those local communities. And in this case, actually, people will get a phone, they'll get an application on their phone. And with the application, they can take a picture of a tree that they are planting and they are nurturing. That picture goes into the database, and based on verification, they get payments for maintaining and growing that tree, which helps keeping the city green, reducing flooding and reducing urban heat. And the government's already been able to create 500 jobs in the city in the middle of the COVID response through this project that actually implements nature-based solutions.
Sounds brilliant. Todd, do you have anything to add?
Well, I guess I would add to it that providing these multi-purpose infrastructure projects that incorporate nature into them provides, I would say, quality natural space for people, outside. And I think many of us have felt those pressures during the last year of the pandemic of being like cooped up and kept in, and all of the, the psychological issues that produces at a personal level. We need more quality spaces in our urban environments in our cities where people can be out, right, and find relief.
There's been so much commentary recently about the psychological impacts of people being cooped up, people not getting out, people not having green space to enjoy. Apparently, doctors are actually prescribing walks in the woods now as for mental health. So it's really important that people think differently, decision makers think differently about green space and about natural infrastructure, the kinds of things that you two are both completely focused on in your work.
Organizations like the World Bank and the Corps of Engineers, which are guiding and implementing investments in infrastructure, are keenly interested in ways of growing the value proposition, of increasing the benefits and services that comes from that investment in infrastructure, and diversifying by combining nature with the conventional engineering is a way of growing that business case, growing the return on investment that has tremendous opportunity.
And both Engineering with Nature and the World Bank have been working on some really interesting collaborative guidelines that have come together based on a lot of input from a lot of scientists, experts, practitioners around the world. I'd like to talk a bit about how guidelines like the World Bank's nature-based solutions and the Army Corps' natural and nature-based guidelines, which will be out this summer, are helping both project funders, decision makers, and program managers think differently, make different decisions, focus on natural infrastructure. Maybe I could start with you, Brenden.
What we need is the right knowledge at the right time to influence decisions, and that's really where we see the trick. And we often have that opportunity working with countries, looking at these risks, proposing solutions. There's a moment where you're going to do your detailed study. There's a moment where you're going to work with specialists to identify, well, what is the risk of flooding to these vulnerable communities? What are the solutions that we can implement here to protect those people? And that's often still the point where you see that often only the traditional engineering solutions are being considered. And, the consultants may come up with, okay, let's just build a dike. We know how to do that and it's easy. And let's go ahead and do this. And what we have been really lacking so far is detailed guidance, enough knowledge to say, well, no, let's not do this standalone hard engineering structure. Let's look at this innovative solutions. Let's combine this dike with mangrove plantation or what works in this environment to both increase the resilience objectives and also create all those co-benefits that we've been talking about. And the work that we've been doing with Todd and his team and on the detailed guidance and some of the other guidance notes is really to achieve that objective, to have that knowledge base. What steps do we need to take to analyze the problem, to analyze the different solutions? How do we compute the costs and the benefits of doing different types of nature-based infrastructure? And also, very importantly, once we decide to do this investment in nature-based solutions, once we build it, how do we maintain it? And how do we track the progress? And how do we make sure we are adaptive in the management of these ecosystems? And that's also one of the tricky points. So I think bringing in those guidance really helps us both to make sure the decision is taken to implement those nature-based solutions, and that also they are more sustainable on the longer term.
I guess I would add to the good points that Brenden just made is that all people and all organizations from time to time will find themselves stuck in a rut, doing the same thing over and over again. And we need to prompt ourselves at times to think differently. To escape the conceptual box we build for ourselves and work outside that frame. And guidance is really key to that. Forward-looking guidance is a way of prompting professional scientists, engineers, and organizations to think differently about the problem and about the solution set. And that's, I think, part of the real value of the World Bank's guidelines and also the guidelines that we've been working on together for the use of natural and nature-based features to support flood risk management is to enable people to work within the information within these guidelines to escape the rut.
I think the guidelines are absolutely critical, as you both say, but I also think that the examples are really, really important. And the examples that you have in the Engineering with Nature Atlas 1 and Atlas 2, tangible evidence that natural and nature-based solutions work and are working. And Brenden, some of the papers that you folks have put out, I read a couple of the ones that you've been authoring about your work in Mozambique. It's very compelling examples of how to think about things differently and what the results can be. So I think that the notion of not just collaboration, but also sharing examples, getting the word out as broadly as you can is going to really help decision makers, policy makers, but also practitioners on the ground.
I can't agree more, Sarah. And people are afraid to be the first mover often in many situations, or they can have a guidance note, they can have the theory, but having an example really works and really brings home that this can be done in different circumstances. I think what's critical here is to have examples that work well, also have examples where things did not work so well, and have examples in a wide variety of circumstances. For example, my work in Beira, in Mozambique, in Africa, I can advise them. I can say, well, look at what my city in the Netherlands, look what Rotterdam has done. But for them, Rotterdam will be such a different example, such a very different situation in terms of the amount of financing that's available, in terms of the urban development that's going on. So if we can bring more examples from Africa, more examples from rapidly developing cities in Asia, that often brings it home in a much better way and helps these governments implement the solutions in their own city as well.
As we wrap up this episode, Brenden, maybe you can talk a little bit about what's ahead for you. What are you going to be focused on? What's your next project?
Yeah, it's actually an exciting time. The World Bank is actually launching a new global program on nature-based solutions for climate resilience, which I will be leading, which really aims to scale the implementation of these solutions across the countries that we work with. And I think in order to do so over the next couple of years, we'll need to do a few things. Now, on the one hand, we need to have more knowledge, more tools to identify and analyze these nature-based solutions. We work in complex situations with dynamic ecosystems, rapidly developing cities, as we discussed. So we need to keep working on the knowledge side, and we need to have more understanding of the cost, the benefits, the economics of this as well. Furthermore, we need to look at the financing. So in some cases, nature-based solutions even offer innovative ways of financing the investments. In many cases, these are public investments with a public goal to protect the vulnerable people. But there are also opportunities to bring in the private sector and fund some of these. And we see some examples where, for example, insurance constructions are put in place for the financing of the restoration of coral reefs, for example. Or private water companies can be brought in to restore ecosystems where these ecosystems have a role in water purification. So we need to really look at some of these examples and see what financing constructions work well to make sure we actually have the funds to scale this up. And then we need to look at that not just for the financing of the investment, but especially for the maintenance as well. Often we can come in with a 5-year project, we invest in these solutions, but then what happens in the next 10 years? Who is going to fund this maintenance? So there I see also a critical area for us to work on.
How do you make your work sustainable, and how do you keep the resilience up?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And is most of your work going forward going to be in Africa?
No, our program is really global. So we have some of the case studies I mentioned now in Africa. We also have case studies in Latin America. We work in Panama, for example, where we did a very detailed study on the integration of nature-based solutions in the urban development of Panama City. We have a lot of projects going on in Asia. Our team is working in Indonesia, where there's a large effort going on mangrove restoration for coastal protection. So it's really all over the world. I even worked in Afghanistan, in a country where you think, wow, what can we do with nature-based solutions in Afghanistan? Even there, we look at how nature-based solutions such as reforestation of hillsides can help reduce the risk of avalanches to key roads in Afghanistan that kill many people every year. So we work really all over the globe, and different solutions for different places.
Lots of challenges and lots of opportunities to find new solutions. Todd, talk a little bit about what's coming up for the Engineering with Nature program.
We're excited that this summer we're expecting to release the product of 5 years of work. And this is our guidelines on the use of natural and nature-based features for flood risk management. And this effort is producing a 900-page guidance document to describe how to use beaches and sand dunes and islands and wetlands and reefs and other landscape features, both in the coastal setting as well as their counterparts in riverine context, to reduce flood risk, to enhance resilience, in combination with other approaches. And this effort has brought together a host of expertise and knowledge from around the world. More than 175 contributors and authors have worked on this effort over the last 5 years. So we're excited to share this with others. The World Bank has been a highly valued partner in this effort and really made substantive contributions, in particular to our chapter on benefits evaluation, how to do this kind of analysis so that we can support decision making. So we're really looking forward to releasing that guide, and then beyond that, of organizing events in which we can bring expertise from around the world together to educate and to train others as they desire on implementing solutions of this nature. So this is a very exciting period of time for us, and we're very much looking forward to the summer.
And we absolutely encourage our listeners to stay tuned for the release of the natural and nature-based guidelines. It is a huge, huge amount of work. I didn't know it had kind of grown to be that large a volume, but it's a huge piece of work and a really significant piece of work. I think it's going to be pretty amazing for policymakers, decision makers, practitioners. It's really going to advance the practice. So something to look forward to this summer. Thank you, Brenden, for joining our podcast today. There's such very strong synergies between the World Bank's focus on natural infrastructure as a critical component of so many different global challenges, including climate change. And your international perspective really brings a different flavor to the podcast. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for having me on the show.
And Todd, thanks for highlighting the synergies with engineering with nature and how these approaches are really changing how people think about and plan for natural infrastructure solutions that will be sustainable, resilient, and really benefit the communities in which you're working. To our listeners, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast with Sarah Thorne. We encourage you to join the conversation. Visit our website at engineeringwithnature.org. This podcast was developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, Deputy National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Engineering with Nature podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions. I'm Dave Trafford.